The red moon hung low in the sky like a bleeding eye, cold and full of judgment. Vera stood in the center of the great stone circle, her arms wrapped tightly around her small son. Her dark purple robes were torn, stained with ash and dirt. The elders of her clan sat high above her on curved thrones made of bone and steel, their faces hard, their eyes glowing with blue fire. "You defied the right of silence," one of them said, voice echoing through the empty valley. "You screamed. When your mate fell in battle," another added, "you spilled blood that was not yours to spill." Vera's lips trembled, but she kept her head down. She had tried to protect her son, to live through the chaos. Her mate, strong and proud, had been struck down in a border raid. She was left alone. Surrounded by scavengers, she fought back, broke rules, and now she would pay. "My child is innocent," she whispered, voice dry from thirst. "Punish me, but let him stay." The High Elder raised his hand, and silence fell. "Both of you are cast out," he declared. "No home, no name, no clan. Let the red moon watch over you as you vanish." Guards stepped forward and took her by the arms. Her son, barely 5 cycles old, began to cry. She held him tighter. Refusing to let go, one of the guards tried to pull the child away, but she growled a deep warning sound from her throat. The guards backed off, and instead shoved her toward the edge of the platform there. A narrow path led down from the cliff into the human territories, a place no clan dared to live. To the elders, it was a death sentence. To Vera, it was unknown, but it was all she had left. No one gave her food, no water, not even a blanket. Her son coughed softly against her chest, his skin pale and cold. She kissed his forehead, whispering in his ear, "We're still together, little star." The two walked alone into the dark hills, leaving behind the only world they knew. Wind howled across the rocks, sharp and bitter. Vera's bare feet bled on the sharp stones, but she didn't stop. She couldn't afford to. Every time she looked back, the red moon seemed closer, like it was following them, like it wanted to watch her fall. Hours passed, maybe more. Time didn't make sense anymore. The land began to change, the mountains growing smaller, the air growing warmer. Strange sounds came from the trees, metal birds, human machines, lights blinked in the far distance. Warm yellow and white dots. In a sea of black, Vera crouched behind a thick bush and looked at her son. His eyes were half closed, his breathing soft and shallow. He hadn't eaten since yesterday, hadn't slept in safety for longer than that. She pulled off her outer robe, wrapping it around him. Her own skin shivered in the cold air, but she didn't care. She could survive hunger, pain, cold, but he couldn't. In the distance, a loud mechanical sound echoed. Something was coming, large wheels rolling over dirt, engines humming. A human vehicle, she guessed. She clutched her son tightly and pressed herself flat to the ground, heart pounding. Would they shoot her on sight? Would they take her child away? She didn't know what humans did to outsiders. Her people only spoke of them with fear. The sound passed, fading into the night. But now she knew humans were close. She had to decide. Hide and risk her son dying in her arms, or step into the light and pray for kindness. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them away. Fear had no place in her heart anymore, not while her son still breathed. She stood, lifted him in her arms, and walked toward the farmlands glowing under the red moon. The soil was soft now, not rocks, not blood, just dirt. Somewhere beyond these fields was a barn, a house, a warm fire. Maybe someone with eyes kind enough to see a mother and child, not a threat, not an enemy. As the red moon began to sink behind the hills, she saw the outline of a wooden fence. She stepped closer, her legs shaking, and saw a small house in the distance, smoke rising from its chimney. A dog barked somewhere in the dark. and a light flicked on near the barn. Someone was coming outside. Vera froze heart in her throat, holding her son tightly. She didn't know if this was a beginning or an end, but it was the only path left to walk. And so, under the last red light of the cursed moon, Vera took one more step forward, not as a warrior, not as a clan daughter, but as a mother who would do anything to keep her child alive, even trust a human. The old man stepped out of the house, a dim lantern in his hand. He squinted at the darkness, wondering if the dog was chasing raccoons again. His boots crunched against the frosted grass as he moved toward the barn, but something made him stop. There near the fence, almost hidden by shadow, was a figure. Small, quiet, still. He raised the lantern. The golden light spilling across the ground. A woman, maybe, standing barefoot in the dirt. Holding something in her arms, her skin shimmered. Faintly in the light, not like human skin, not at all. Her face was half covered by a cloth, but her eyes glowed like soft violet fire. He didn't move, didn't speak, not yet. The wind carried a sound toward him, a cough. Dry and weak. A child, the old man realized. That thing in her arms was a child, sick, wrapped in rags. She took one slow step forward, then another. The old man could see her legs shaking, knees nearly giving out. She didn't raise her hands or ask for help. She just stood there, letting the wind speak for her. The child coughed again, this time louder. And the woman flinched, pulling the boy closer. The old man lowered his lantern. His name was Eli. And he hadn't let a soul near his land since his wife passed. But now, as he looked into the alien woman's eyes, he saw something that broke through the wall he had built. Fear, but not for herself. It was the fear of a mother who thought her child might not survive the night. Without a word, Eli turned and walked back to the house. He left the door open behind him, just a crack. He placed the lantern on the kitchen table, then came back out with an old wool blanket and half a loaf of bread. The woman hadn't moved, not 1 inch, but her breathing had grown slower, steadier. As if she'd been waiting to see what he would do, he approached slowly, keeping his hands low. She tensed, ready to run, but didn't. When he offered the bread, she stared at it like it was gold. Then, with shaking fingers, she took it and pressed it to her child's lips first. The boy chewed slowly, too tired to smile. But the woman looked at Eli with wide eyes, blinking hard. He wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, then pointed toward the barn, his voice rough. "It's warmer in there?" She didn't answer, only nodded once and followed him. Her bare feet silent on the grass, inside the barn. Eli lit an old heater and cleared a place on the hay. The woman sat down and laid her son beside her, covering him carefully. Eli gave her a flask of warm water and turned to leave, but paused at the door. "I ain't gonna turn you in," he said softly. "Just stay quiet, stay safe." She didn't understand the words. Not all of them, but the way he said them was enough. She bowed her head slightly in thanks, then focused all her attention on the child, who was already fast asleep, wrapped in warmth and safety for the first time in days. Eli closed the barn door behind him and leaned against the wall. Breathing deep, he didn't know why he let her stay or what would happen next. All he knew was this: he had seen too much death in his life to let a child freeze in his field. No matter what species he came from, out in the trees beyond the farm. Something else moved, a quiet click, a flash of metal, then silence again. Unseen eyes had watched everything, but for now, the barn was still. The moon had passed, and a small, fragile hope had begun to take root beneath the straw and shadows. Morning came slow and cold, the sky a soft gray over Eli's quiet farm. Inside the barn, Vera opened her eyes, unsure if she had really slept or just drifted in and out of fear. Her son was curled up beside her, wrapped tight in the old blanket. His breathing calm for the first time in days. There was no wind screaming around them, no one chasing them. No orders shouted at her to kneel or obey. Just silence, warm and strange. The barn door creaked open, and Vera sat up quickly. Her body tense, ready to run again, but it was only the old human. Carrying 2 bowls, steam rising from one, he stopped near the hay, nodded once, and handed her the smaller bowl of thin soup. But it smelled rich and alive. She hesitated, then took it, dipping her fingers in and letting the boy taste it first. His eyes blinked open, and for the first time, he gave a tiny smile. Vera felt something in her chest break and rebuild at the same time. Eli sat on an overturned bucket, watching without saying much. He didn't need to talk, not yet. The way she held her child, the way she barely touched her own bowl until the boy finished his, told him everything he needed to know. This wasn't an invader, wasn't a spy or threat, just a mother who had lost too much. Outside the barn, across the hills, something else was watching. A long black drone hovered high above the treetops, nearly invisible to the eye. It had no soul, no heart, just a camera and a quiet task record. Identify, report. It had picked up the heat signature during the night, and now it zoomed in, clicking as it captured the shapes moving inside the barn. Data streamed back to a small patrol base 3 miles away. A human officer glanced at the alert, raised an eyebrow, and called his team back at the farm. Eli handed Vera a small photo from his coat pocket. It showed a human woman, smiling. Her arms around 2 children, he tapped his chest, then the photo, and said, "Family." Then he pointed at Vera and her son, repeating, "Family," but in a questioning tone. Vera didn't understand the words exactly, but she nodded, placing her hand on her son's head. "Zico," she said softly, then touched her chest. "Vera." Eli nodded, whispering the names once, as if locking them inside his memory. A dog barked from outside, not the usual lazy bark, this one sharp. Alert, Eli stood at once, walked to the barn door, and looked out. A vehicle was parked by the edge of his field, sleek, dark gray, government grade, too clean for a neighbor, too quiet for a friend. He muttered a curse under his breath and walked back inside. Vera could see the change in his face, calm replaced by tension, warmth replaced by warning. She stood too, instinct pulling her close to her child again. "Stay quiet," Eli whispered, making a motion with his hand across his mouth. Then he grabbed his old shotgun from the wall, more dust than weapon, but it still worked. He walked out of the barn slowly, locking the door behind him with a soft click. 2 men stood near the vehicle, dressed in black vests and pale visors. One smiled too much. The other didn't smile at all. "Morning, old man," the smiling one said. "Mind if we ask a few questions?" Eli grunted. "That depends." The other officer stepped forward, holding a scanner. "We picked up unauthorized biosigns from this area." Eli shrugged. "Got raccoons, a few big deer." The smiling one laughed. "Or maybe something." "Not from Earth." Eli's hand tightened on the shotgun, but he didn't raise it. "If I saw anything," he said, voice steady, "I'd let the right people know. We are the right people." The serious one said, eyes scanning the barn. Eli moved slightly, blocking the view. "You got a warrant." The 2 men looked at each other, then back at Eli. "Not yet," the smiling one said, "but we'll be back." Eli watched them leave, not saying another word. Only after the vehicle disappeared down the road did he go back inside the barn. Vera hadn't moved, but her body was shaking now, and her son was awake, his small hand gripping her tightly. "They'll come again," Eli said quietly. "Next time, with more questions." Vera didn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. She looked at her son, then at the old man. Eyes full of fear and trust, Eli took a deep breath, rubbed his hand across his tired face, and muttered, "What the hell am I doing?" Then he turned to the far wall, pulled aside a stack of hay, and opened a hidden hatch in the floor. "Come on," he said. "You're not safe up here anymore." The hatch creaked as it opened, revealing a narrow space below the barn floor. It was dusty, lined with old crates and half-broken tools, but it was dry, hidden, and safe. Eli had built it decades ago. Back when the world was less trusting and wars came too close to the land. He never thought he'd use it again, not for this. Vera climbed down first, carefully holding her son in her arms. He was light, too light, but his breathing was steadier now. Eli followed after her, pulling. The hatch shut behind them, plunging the space into near darkness. Then he lit a small lantern, soft and golden, casting flickering shadows on the wooden walls. The room was cramped, but Vera didn't care. She sank to the floor, placing her son on a folded blanket Eli had brought. Zico curled up and closed his eyes without a sound, as if his tiny body finally trusted the silence. Eli sat across from her, arms crossed, eyes studying her face. "You got any idea what they'd do if they find you here?" he asked, not expecting an answer. Vera tilted her head, sensing the weight in his voice. Even if she didn't understand the words, he tapped the floor once, slowly, then said, "Danger," and pointed upward. She nodded, then placed her hand on her son's chest, repeating softly, "Danger." Hours passed slowly. The only sounds were Zico's soft breaths and the creak of old wood shifting above them. Eli offered food, against dried fruit and warm water. But Vera accepted it with both hands and whispered thanks in her own language. After a while, Eli reached into his coat and pulled out something smaller, worn piece of metal with buttons. A translator chip, old but still functional, he held it out to her, and she stared at it like it was a relic of magic. Slowly, she took it, fitted it behind her ear, and blinked twice, waiting. Then Eli spoke again, slow and clear. "Do you understand me now?" She flinched, then gasped. The words suddenly reshaped in her mind. "Yes," she said, her voice raspy. "I understand." Eli let out a small grunt, half surprise, half satisfaction. "That's better," he said. "Now we can stop playing charades." Vera placed her hands in her lap, eyes lowered. "You are kind, farmer," she whispered. "I do not know why." Eli scratched his beard. "I had a daughter once," he said, "and grandkids." He paused, his voice softer now. "Lost them all in a crash. Long time ago." Vera looked up slowly, her lips parted. "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "That's life, cruel and quiet." For a moment, the room held nothing but shared silence. Then Vera said, "My clan banished me, called me impure, cursed." She ran her fingers through her son's hair. "He has no father now, no home?" Eli leaned forward, his voice low. "You do now." Above them, the sound of footsteps made them freeze. A vehicle had returned, its wheels crunching the gravel outside the barn. Eli's face went stiff, and he reached for the small monitor he had wired long ago. A black uniformed patrol officer stood outside, scanning the area. Then, without warning, a drone buzzed low and dropped a tiny sensor on the barn roof. Eli cursed quietly. "They're setting traps." Vera gripped Zico tighter. "We should run." "Run where?" Eli snapped. "You won't get far on foot, not with that kid." He looked back at the monitor. "Thinking fast. I'll deal with them," he said. "You stay down here." Vera caught his wrist, surprising him with her strength. "Why help us?" she asked again. He didn't answer right away, just stared at the blinking screen. Then he looked at her, voice gravelly, "Because no one helped me when I needed it." He climbed out of the hatch and closed it carefully, making sure nothing looked disturbed. Outside, the officer was circling the barn slowly, like a wolf sniffing a wounded deer. Eli opened the barn door with a lazy swing. "Looking for something?" he asked, shotgun resting against his shoulder. The officer smiled, but his eyes were cold, just making sure no one's harboring aliens. Eli spat into the dirt. You see any aliens here? Not yet, the officer said, but sensors picked up movement again. Could be my dog, Eli replied. He don't like strangers, I bet, the man said. Glancing toward the house, we'll be back with authorization. Bring it, Eli said. I've got nothing to hide. The officer walked away. But Eli knew better. They'd be back, and next time, they wouldn't ask nicely below the floor. Vera listened to every word, her hands trembling. She wasn't just fighting for her life anymore. She was fighting for the one man willing to stand between her son and the cold claws of the world. And in that quiet place beneath the barn, a decision grew strong in her heart. She wouldn't run again, not this time. The wind had changed, colder now, sharper, carrying the smell of fuel and dust. Eli stood near the edge of his porch with a mug of black coffee in his hand, pretending to enjoy the morning. But his eyes were fixed on the road, on the tracks left. By the patrol's vehicle, they would come back, he knew it, and next time, they'd bring more than questions. Inside the house, Vera sat by the fire, her hands resting on her knees, her face blank. Zico was asleep on the rug beside her. Warm and safe for now. The child had begun to smile again, even laugh once or twice. But Vera's heart remained heavy. Peace like this never lasted. Eli entered, closing the door behind him. We have a problem, he said plainly. Vera looked up, her eyes steady. They will come again. He nodded. Probably tonight. She rose to her feet. Her voice low but clear. Then we go. Now. Eli sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. You won't make it far. I've survived worse, she said. You should not risk your life for me. He didn't answer right away, just stared into the fire, watching the flames crack and twist. I'm not letting them take that boy. He finally said he deserves more than fear. Vera stepped closer. Why? Eli looked at her, and this time there was no gruffness in his voice. Just something quiet and raw. Because I saw my grandson die, and I couldn't stop it. Now I have a chance to protect someone else's. Outside, the first snowflakes began to fall, soft and quiet. The sky turned a pale silver, and the air thickened with silence. Eli walked to the cellar door and opened it wide. Revealing a ladder and a metal trunk at the bottom, he climbed down, Vera following close behind. Careful not to wake the boy. The cellar was older than the barn itself. Built with thick stone walls and lined with old war tools, Eli opened the trunk and began laying out pieces of second heater, canned food, water packs, even a small pulse pistol with one full charge. This was for storms and coyotes. He said, now it's for real trouble. Vera took the pistol, examining it carefully. You trust me with this. I've seen how you hold your kid, he said. That tells me enough. They worked through the day, turning the cellar into something more than a hiding spot. Vera reinforced the hatch with wood planks and scrap metal, while Eli adjusted the antenna wiring to block outside signals. At sunset, they shared a quiet meal, Zico eating first, his cheeks fuller than before. Then Eli spoke, his voice like gravel. They'll come after dark. Vera nodded, pulling the pistol close to her chest. Let them. Night fell fast, covering the land in a heavy blanket of silence. Eli stayed upstairs. The lights dimmed, the rifle loaded. He sat near the window, watching the road, breathing slowly below, in the cellar. Vera whispered lullabies to her son, ancient words from a dying clan. She no longer feared being alone because she wasn't anymore. A soft vibration ran through the ground, then the sound of tires crunching snow. Headlights lit up the trees outside, sweeping across Eli's porch. 3 vehicles this time. Black, armored, silent. Doors opened, boots hit the ground, and voices spoke in cold tones. Eli stepped outside with the rifle in his hands. his breath forming mist in the air. One officer raised a hand. "We have reason to believe you're harboring fugitives." "I already told you," Eli growled. "I live alone. You'll let us search." The officer said, "Or we'll make our own entrance." Eli raised the rifle just enough to be clear. "I'll shoot the first man that touches my barn door." The standoff held for seconds that felt like years. Then a voice crackled through the officers' radios, unreadable but urgent. They paused, confused. Then slowly lowered their weapons. "We'll return." One said sharply, "This isn't over." "It is if you keep pushing," Eli muttered. Watching them leave, as the engines faded into the night, he let out a slow breath. He walked back inside and tapped on the hidden door. It opened, and Vera climbed up, her face tight with worry. "They're gone," he said. "For now." She stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. Her voice soft but steady. "You are not like the others." Eli smiled just a little. "Neither are you." Snow fell harder now, covering their tracks, covering the fears, inside the quiet farmhouse. A human, an alien woman, and her son sat close by the fire, not as strangers, but something closer to a family. And outside, the world turned colder, but their hope stayed warm. The sun didn't rise the next morning, not really. Thick clouds stretched across the sky like old wounds. Hiding the light, Eli stood by the porch steps, boots planted in the snow, eyes fixed on the distant tree line. He didn't like silence. Like this not on his land, not after last night, inside the house. Vera moved carefully, her body still tense from hours of hiding. She had barely slept. Her mind running like a trapped animal. Zico was awake, playing with a carved wooden bird Eli had made during the night. He laughed softly, his cheeks glowing with warmth. Unaware of the storm waiting just beyond the fence, Vera stepped outside, wrapping an old coat around her shoulders. One Eli had found in a trunk buried beneath the stairs. She joined him without speaking, just standing beside him, eyes searching the trees the same way he did. "You hear that?" Eli asked, voice rough. Vera shook her head. "Nothing." "Exactly," he said. "That's the problem." The quiet didn't last long. A soft hum touched the air, low and sharp, like metal dragging across stone. Eli's hands tightened around his rifle, and he nodded toward the barn. Vera understood. Running inside and pulling Zico into her arms, she climbed down into the cellar again. But this time, she left the hatch slightly open, eyes watching the house above. Eli waited on the porch as a black drone hovered into view, circling the barn twice before stopping midair. It let out a burst of static, and a red dot blinked to life on Eli's chest. He didn't flinch, didn't move, just stared at it like a man with nothing left to lose. "You want something?" he growled. "You come get it yourself." And they did. 5 patrol trucks rolled in from the east. No lights, no sirens. Just power and speed. Soldiers jumped out, armored and faceless, moving with the precision of machines. Eli stepped down from the porch and planted his boots in the middle of the path. One of the men raised a megaphone. "Step aside. This is a federal retrieval." "You'll get nothing from me," Eli said, leveling his rifle. "And I mean nothing inside the cellar." Vera heard every word, every footstep above her head. She kissed Zico's forehead and whispered to him in her native tongue. The boy held her tightly. Small fingers curled into her robe. When she heard the safety clicks of rifles outside, she rose slowly and pulled the pistol Eli had given her. Her eyes no longer held fear, they burned with purpose. Back above, one of the soldiers stepped forward. Ignoring Eli's warning, the old man fired once into the air, the sound cracking like thunder. "Next one's in your chest," he said, voice shaking but unbroken. The soldier froze, then glanced toward his commander, unsure. The commander signaled him to stop, from the trees behind the soldiers. Another noise emerged, one they didn't expect. Distant engines, not military, not patrol, but farm machines, dozens of them, tractors, old loaders, grain haulers, all rumbling toward the fence line. And behind them, people, neighbors, local, farmers, men and women with worn hands and tired eyes. Not warriors, but not cowards either. They lined up silently, a wall of civilians on the edge of the field, each holding something: wrenches, axes, hunting rifles. One woman stepped forward, her voice loud. "This man fed our families during the drought." Another shouted, "You want a war? Try picking one with all of us." The patrol hesitated, their orders suddenly thin against the weight of community. The red dot on Eli's chest flickered, then vanished a moment later. The soldiers retreated to their trucks, not a word spoken, not a threat repeated. The drone blinked once more and flew off into the clouds, leaving only the wind behind. Eli lowered his rifle and let out a long, slow breath. He looked toward the barn, and a moment later, Vera stepped out, holding Zico, her eyes wide at the sight of the people who had come to stand for them. No one spoke to her, but they didn't need to. A nod here, a gentle smile there, it was enough. That night, Eli sat by the fire with Vera and Zico. The house finally quiet again. The storm had passed for now, but they all knew more might come someday. Still, something had changed, something strong. They weren't just hiding anymore. They belonged here now, and the land, silent and snow-covered, seemed to accept them, one breath at a time. The sun didn't rise the next morning, not really. Thick clouds stretched across the sky like old wounds. Hiding the light, Eli stood by the porch steps, boots planted in the snow, eyes fixed on the distant tree line. He didn't like silence. Like this, not on his land. Not after last night, inside the house. Vera moved carefully, her body still tense from hours of hiding. She had barely slept, her mind running like a trapped animal. Zico was awake, playing with a carved wooden bird Eli had made during the night. He laughed softly, his cheeks glowing with warmth. Unaware of the storm waiting just beyond the fence, Vera stepped outside, wrapping an old coat around her shoulders. One Eli had found in a trunk buried beneath the stairs. She joined him without speaking, just standing beside him, eyes searching the trees the same way he did. "You hear that?" Eli asked, voice rough. Vera shook her head. "Nothing. Exactly," he said. "That's the problem." The quiet didn't last long. A soft hum touched the air, low and sharp, like metal dragging across stone. Eli's hands tightened around his rifle, and he nodded toward the barn. Vera understood. Running inside and pulling Zico into her arms, she climbed down into the cellar again. But this time she left the hatch slightly open, eyes watching the house above. Eli waited on the porch as a black drone hovered into view, circling the barn twice before stopping midair. It let out a burst of static, and a red dot blinked to life on Eli's chest. He didn't flinch, didn't move, just stared at it like a man with nothing left to lose. "You want something?" he growled. "You come get it yourself." And they did. 5 patrol trucks rolled in from the east. No lights, no sirens, just power and speed. Soldiers jumped out, armored and faceless, moving with the precision of machines. Eli stepped down from the porch and planted his boots in the middle of the path. One of the men raised a megaphone. "Step aside. This is a federal retrieval." "You'll get nothing from me," Eli said, leveling his rifle. "And I mean nothing," inside the cellar. Vera heard every word, every footstep above her head. She kissed Zico's forehead and whispered to him in her native tongue. The boy held her tightly. Small fingers curled into her robe. When she heard the safety clicks of rifles outside, she rose slowly and pulled the pistol Eli had given her. Her eyes no longer held fear. They burned with purpose. Back above, one of the soldiers stepped forward. Ignoring Eli's warning, The old man fired once into the air, the sound cracking like thunder. "Next one's in your chest," he said, voice shaking but unbroken. The soldier froze, then glanced toward his commander, unsure. The commander signaled him to stop from the trees behind the soldiers. Another noise emerged, one they didn't expect. Distant engines, not military, not patrol, but farm machines, dozens of them, tractors, old loaders, grain haulers, all rumbling toward the fence line. And behind them, people, neighbors, local, farmers, men and women with worn hands and tired eyes. Not warriors, but not cowards either. They lined up silently. A wall of civilians on the edge of the field, each holding something: wrenches, axes, hunting rifles. One woman stepped forward, her voice loud. "This man fed our families during the drought." Another shouted, "You want a war? Try picking one with all of us." The patrol hesitated, their orders suddenly thin against the weight of community. The red dot on Eli's chest flickered, then vanished. A moment later, the soldiers retreated to their trucks, not a word spoken. Not a threat repeated. The drone blinked once more and flew off into the clouds, leaving only the wind behind. Eli lowered his rifle and let out a long, slow breath. He looked toward the barn, and a moment later, Vera stepped out, holding Zico, her eyes wide at the sight of the people who had come to stand for them. No one spoke to her, but they didn't need to. A nod here, a gentle smile there, it was enough. That night, Eli sat by the fire with Vera and Zico. The house finally quiet again. The storm had passed for now, but they all knew more might come someday. Still, something had changed, something strong. They weren't just hiding anymore. They belonged here, now, and the land, silent and snow-covered, seemed to accept them, one breath at a time.